Hello, my friends. You are about to witness chess like you have never seen before. An attack so unbelievable that it will literally boggle your mind and leave you questioning everything that you thought you knew. Not only about chess, but maybe even about life itself. Your entire worldview just might be shaken to its very core by this incredible game, played only yesterday, which began so innocently with this run-of-the-mill Ruy Lopez opening. Nothing special so far. These two players, whose identities I will reveal toward the end of this video, are going right down the main freeway of opening territory. Nothing adventurous. These moves have been played in so many millions of games before that even commenting on them seems like a silly and needless delay. We want to get right into the good stuff as quickly as possible because I know that's what you came here to see. Rook to e8 is the first move that's a little bit unusual, although we're still in well-known theory. It's a bit more common here to move the knight off c6 so that c5 can be played a bit sooner, challenging white's pawn center, which is established on the very next move with d4. Bishop to b7 now, knight b to d2, bishop to f8, a standard move, opening up the rook's eyes towards the center. Bishop to c2, a little redeployment of the bishop, supporting the e4 pawn. We have knight to b8, preparing c5. Bishop to d3 just improves the bishop a little bit and kind of baits black into playing what he played next. And that is e takes d4, c takes d4, and c5, allowing white to close up the center, which he does with the move d5. Now we have c4 hitting the bishop, which drops right back to c2. We have an imbalanced position. Black has this nice pawn majority on the queen side, but he's a bit behind in development. His bishop on b7 is blocked. What he plays next is g6, looking to put this bishop on a beautiful, now opened diagonal. Knight to f1 now, redeploying to the g3 square. We have knight b to d7 and bishop to g5, pinning that knight on f6. And here we go. Let's push those pawns. And who do you think is going to win this game? Let me know in the comments before you finish watching this video, which side do you prefer here? Queen d2 from white. We got knight to c5, rook a to d1, some very predictable moves. b4, just pushing them pawns. Knight to d4, that's a nice post for the white knight. And now rook to e5, setting up the possibility of a discovered attack on this bishop on g5 with the move knight takes f4, which is possible because it would hit white's queen. So bishop to h6 gets out of the way of that and looks to eliminate this beautiful bishop on g7. Black says no thank you, drops the bishop back to h8. That's one of his best pieces. And now rook to e3. What does this do? Well, you're adding a little extra coverage along this third rank. That's where black's going to want to push one of these pawns at some point in the near future. Queen to b6 now. Black is clearly going for queenside play. Queen to e2, eyeing c4. But after a4, declines capturing that pawn. If you were to play queen takes c4 here, of course, bishop to a6 would win the white queen. You don't want that. White plays a3. Now b3, pushing the bishop back to b1, bishop to a6, threatening a discovery with c3, hitting the white queen. So queen to f3. And this is where the game just goes completely nuts. Fasten your seatbelt, folks, because here comes knight to d3, uncovering an attack on the knight on d4, hitting the pawn on b2. Now, what would you play here as white? Feel free to pause the video. The correct move here is going to be knight to c6, attacking the rook here on e5. If you instead were to take out the knight on d3, then queen takes d4, leaves white with the bishop still under attack and the b2 pawn still hit. Black is winning. So, knight to c6 hits the rook, but wait a minute, doesn't knight takes b2 work because it counterattacks the rook here on d1? Well, no. This actually allows white to win some material with knight takes e5. Because if black were to play knight takes d1 here, which is not what happened in the game, knight c6 would threaten checkmate with knight to e7. So that must be addressed. Let's say rook e8 is played, and then after queen takes d1, white has an easy win, being up a whole piece, and black does not have enough to show for it. So in the game, what was played instead was d takes e5, at which point black only has a pawn for the exchange, but the white rook is still hit, and these two connected passed pawns are truly terrifying. So how do you deal with this as white? Again, if you'd like to pause the video and think about it for a few minutes, then go for it. The powerful move that white uncorked in this position is knight to f5, again threatening checkmate with knight to e7. The knight was not captured, but we are definitely going to have to take a look at that move to see what would have happened. Here, you don't play queen to g3. It might be tempting, but this actually loses because the knight can block. This threatens queen takes h6. It also threatens the move f4. So white is actually losing here. What you need to play first is e takes f5. Now queen to g3 check is truly a checkmating threat. So you have to play bishop to g7 so the king can escape to f8. And again, if you try queen to g3, then knight to h5 is going to pick up the bishop, which is why what's played here is d6, blocking the queen's access to that square. Also uncovering an attack on the rook on a8. Let's say the rook moves. Now we got bishop takes g7, king takes g7, queen g3 check, king to f8, and now the amazing queen takes e5, threatening queen to e7 check, followed by rook to g3, which will lead to checkmate. The queen will end up capturing that on f6. So the best try here for black would be knight to g8, covering that e7 square, but we just move there anyway. Because after the knight takes, d takes e7 check is a fork. Moving the king to e8 will allow a mate in one with pawn takes rook. So king to g7, white queens his pawn by taking out the rook on d8. Again, threatening mate, attacking the queen on b6, which means queen takes queen is forced. Then we have rook takes queen, at which point black is completely finished, having way too little material to make anything happen with these pawns. Quite an incredible variation, but this was not what was played. What happened in the game was even more nuts than this, and we'll leave you with your jaw on the floor. What was played was rook to e8, covering that e7 square. We have rook to d2 now. The rook was under attack, so we're hitting the knight on b2. It goes to d3. Now d6, supporting knight to e7. And black will be forced to sacrifice the exchange once the knight goes to e7. But here comes c3, hitting that rook on d2, which white just completely ignores. He drops his knight into e7 with check, as if nothing happened. Of course, the knight has to be removed. D takes e7, c takes d2, and here, white comes up with an unbelievable move. A move that I think very few grandmasters would even consider for more than a few seconds. So if you'd like to pause the video and try to guess what that move is, feel free. The suicidal looking move that white played here is queen takes f6. It does remove the defender of the e8 square, so the pawn is threatening to promote. But this, of course, allows black to queen his own pawn with check. We have king to h2, and now black simply plays queen to b8, defending against mate. And white is just busted, right? I mean, black has two queens, white has no checkmate. What the hell are you going to do here? Well, for starters, there is queen takes a6, picking up a bishop. And we can see that rook takes d3 is now a huge threat, hitting the queen, threatening checkmate. So black very wisely gets the knight out of there, goes to c5, hitting the white queen. So what can white do now? Black is just going to play queen to d7 in a minute. How is white ever going to promote that pawn? Well, once again, I invite you to pause the video and see if you can predict what white plays next. Queen to b6 attacks the queen on b8, taking advantage of the fact that she must stay on this rank, else this pawn will promote and it will be checkmate. So she goes to e8. And here, my friends, white comes up with the final, singular, brilliant move, the only move that doesn't lose, to conclude his epic streak of genius. Can you spot the final tactical shot that white unleashed in this position? Rook to d3, threatening to come into d8, and forcing black to give up his queen. For if you were to take the rook with the knight, there would be queen to d8, forcing mate in 5 moves. And here black can only delay the inevitable with queen to h1 check, knight takes f2 check, stuff like that. So, played in the game by black was the necessary queen takes d3, we have bishop takes d3, and now you still have to stop queen to d8, which means you can't even take the bishop with the knight. You have to put that knight back to e6. At which point material has more or less equalized. I guess white is a pawn up, but look at the condition of black's pieces. White plays bishop to g5 now, defending the pawn on e7. Of course, the bishop's immune from capture. The knight has to guard the d8 square. And now white is threatening things like bishop to b5, queen to d8. Black would love to play f6, but then the knight on e6 would fall with check. So what we have is a desperado b2. But after queen to d8, knight takes queen, white recaptures, queening the pawn, queen takes d8, bishop takes d8. Now we have the bishop on d3, guarding the b1 square. Black is down a whole piece, and so decides to call it a day and resigns, bringing to a close one of the most spectacular games of chess that I have ever seen, played by, as many of you may have guessed, non-humans. Yes, we had Stockfish 16 playing white up against Komodo Dragon with the black pieces. These two engines in particular seem to love creating chaos on the board. I have them playing against each other daily, and I'm sure there will be more incredible games to come. So if you want to keep getting the cream of the crop, go ahead and subscribe to this channel, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.